The nation's system for reporting poverty relies on annual measures that are released months after the close of each calendar year. For example, our most recent official poverty measure was released in September 2015, and it reports the nation's poverty rate during calendar year 2014. By contrast, employment statistics, as you know, are released each month, and they report on labor market conditions in the immediately prior month. So why are employment statistics reported so frequently and poverty statistics reported so infrequently? Is it because we lack the data needed to issue frequent poverty reports? Or is it instead because there's simply no call or no need for frequent poverty reporting? To the contrary, the US bears a real cost by issuing poverty measures only infrequently and with such a substantial lag. And worse yet, it bears this cost even though the requisite data are available and they can be assembled into high-quality poverty measures that can be reported frequently. So today, I want to introduce an initiative launched by the Stanford Center on Poverty and Inequality to develop a new series of frequent poverty measures that will be released quarterly and with relatively short lags. I also want to argue that the more ambitious, long-run objective here should be to develop a fully ramped-up set of poverty measures that can be reported with the same frequency as our standard employment series. So why does the nation need to report poverty measures more frequently? The official poverty measure is, of course, an invaluable tool for monitoring poverty rates. It plays an important role in the assessment of the effects of the economy on the population, and it serves a critical safety net allocation function. And yet the official poverty measure is quite old. It's released almost 9 months after the close of each calendar year, and it then remains static for 12 more months until the next annual release. So today, on March 11th, 2016, the most recent OPM is for calendar year 2014. And this long delay in OPM reporting reduces its value to the country. Why is this? It's because it reduces our capacity to limit poverty through both labor market policy and through safety net policy. With respect to labor market policy, trends in the OPM and in unemployment are, of course, closely related to one another. However, this relationship has been weakening in recent decades. And most notably, this is because of the rise of low-wage jobs. So for workers in these low-wage jobs, it's entirely possible to work full-time and still remain in poverty. And this weakens the aggregate relationship between employment and poverty. This resulting disconnect makes it problematic for the US to continue to conduct its macroeconomic policy on the basis of employment statistics alone. And when economic policy fails, the country turns to the safety net. Turns to programs to protect against malnutrition, to assist with housing, childcare, job training, retraining. But because the OPM is released only infrequently, we're essentially making safety net policy in the blind. With a substantial lag, there's no choice but to fund these programs on the basis of educated guesses about the current size and distribution of poverty. And it would be hard to identify other areas of the federal budget where we're making such critical decisions that are likewise founded on these ad hoc extrapolations into the future. It's thus crucial that we develop a real-time set of measures of economic distress so that policy can flexibly adapt to current circumstances. Frequent measures would provide relevant poverty data, more relevant poverty data, and this would allow us to have more responsive and appropriate policies. At the Stanford Center, we developed 3 measures that move us closer to this goal. And I'm going to focus on these 3 measures today, each of which is measured at the family level. 2 are quarterly measures of poverty. 1 is based on family income, and this is intended to anticipate trends in the official poverty measure. And the second is a measure based solely on wage and salary earnings. And this is intended to tell us the extent to which the labor market alone can deliver families from poverty. And then we've also developed, while it's not directly a measure of poverty, a measure of non-working status. And this is essentially a measure of family-level labor market detachment. And this captures the proportion of individuals who have no working family members. How do we construct these measures? Well, we turn to the current population survey. It's nationally representative and conducted monthly. And we also draw on the ASEC when we need to do imputations. So 2 data sources, the monthly CPS, which I'll just call the CPS, and the ASEC. Our first measure is the measure of family income poverty. And again, this is measuring family income 12 months prior to the date of the CPS survey. And again, the purpose here is to anticipate the official poverty measure. And as such, we're following as closely as possible the income concept used for the official poverty measure. However, the monthly CPS isn't as precise. It doesn't give us as precise a measure of income as we would like. And so in this case, it's not as precise as the ASEC income questions. The ASEC, of course, has a battery of income-related questions. The monthly CPS only asks this so-called control card question, asking the respondent to say, where in these 16 categories does the income fall. Of course, the benefit of this crude, even though it's a crude method of measurement, the benefit is that we can use it to produce a real-time measure of poverty that anticipates the trend in the official measure. So given that the family income question in the monthly CPS is categorical, we do need to impute an actual dollar value for the family income, as the poverty threshold, the poverty threshold falls somewhere in one of these bins, and we can't simply assign, say, the midpoint of the income category to all families, as that would result in either everyone in that category being in poverty or everyone not being in poverty. So we need to do something to assign actual income, continuous measure of income. So to do this, we exploit the fact that the ASEC respondents answer both the detailed battery of income questions in the ASEC, and they thus receive a continuous family income value, and they also answer the control card question that I showed you earlier on the monthly CPS, and this assigns them to to a family income category. So what we do is we divide the ASEC families by their categorical family income, their family size, and their number of children. This gives us 144 cells. We calculate the percentiles of ASEC family income for each grouping. And we next divide the CPS-only families into these same 144 cells. And then we randomly assign a percentile of the ASEC income to the CPS-only families. Is this a perfect solution? No. And we would obviously prefer to have a more precise monthly measure of income, perhaps via a more detailed question on the CPS, via administrative data. Hal, where'd you go? But we think with the current data that we have, the existing data, this is a good solution. So once we have converted the categorical value into continuous values of family income, we assign those to the monthly CPS households, compare those values to the official poverty measure, official poverty threshold, inflation adjusted for the proper reference time period, because again, we're doing this quarterly. This gives us our quarterly family income poverty measure. And we can compare that quarterly measure, as we've done in this slide, to the annual official poverty measure. And as you can see, we closely match the official poverty measure, and we extend the series. The blue line here extends beyond the most recently available OPM. So when we built this particular graph a few months ago, the data that we had up and running were from the third quarter up through the third quarter of 2015, CPS data up through the third quarter of 2015. And again, we're looking back over the past 12 months from that time period. But of course, today in March, I guess the February 2016 CPS are up and running, so we'd be able to extend that blue line another quarter into the future, or another quarter beyond where it is now. Thus, a key feature of this frequent income poverty measure is its timeliness. These measures can be released in anticipation of the annual release of the OPM. And here I'm showing how this timing will line up. Using the currently available CPS data, we could look today at a measure of family income poverty that covers the same basic 12-month period, this is the yellow bar here, that the 2015 OPM will, when it's released this fall in September, approximately September. And we also estimate, the stars here show when we estimate that we'll be able to release these measures, two or three months after the CPS data comes out. So even before the 2015 OPM is released in September, we will be able to add two additional measures, two additional quarterly measures, and these will be more recent measures than the 2015 OPM. So this new reporting frequency can be extended to a full battery of labor market and poverty measures. And in many cases, the current CPS data are even more valuable for measures that don't depend on family income. And so I'll briefly show two of the other measures that we're working on. The first is a measure of of earnings poverty. Here we're comparing usual family earnings, which we annualize, to the same poverty threshold used for the OPM. The purpose of this measure is to determine the extent to which the labor market alone, by way of wages and salary, can deliver families from poverty. The monthly CPS collects precise data on usual earnings, in part because the reference period for earnings is the time of the survey rather than the previous 12 months. And so, as we know, if families had to depend on the labor market alone, many more of them would be in poverty. The earnings-only poverty rate over the most recent 12 months is approximately 30%. And the black line, so the dashed line here, we're not including any self-employment, but the black line imputes self-employment income. The noise you see is seasonality, and we can take that out using the commonly available tools from census. And then finally, so that's the earnings poverty. Finally, we've developed a frequent measure of non-working status. Again, this is not a direct measure of poverty, but we include it here under the argument that in the American context, family attachment to the labor market is a very important indicator of economic well-being. We define three versions of this measure. The first one is simply, is any member of the family working? In the second measure, we exclude those from the universe who are not really at risk of working. But then in the third measure, in the third variation, we add those families back in who may not specifically be at risk, but express a desire to work, because the CPS also asked that question. And all of these, in the slide I'll show next, we've adjusted all of these for seasonality. And here we're looking at the percentage of adults living in non-working families. As we can see, there was a pretty dramatic rise in this right around the Great Recession, and it hasn't declined to pre-recession levels. And then we look at children, and situation, similar trend, but the levels are a bit higher. So to conclude, we argue that we should be developing a battery of frequent poverty and labor market measures, and we've shown that these can be done on a quarterly basis, delivered with a short lag, and this will enable us to track key trends in a more timely way and improve capacity to develop poverty and labor market policy as a result. Thank you.